It's January 6th, 1482. The streets of Paris are packed, loud, and dangerous. The citizens have abandoned their daily routines for the Festival of Fools, a massive street celebration defined by mock popes and rowdy chaos. When you pull back from the mud and the shouting, you see the true ruler of this world. This is 15th century Paris, a landscape defined by the sweeping Gothic mass of Notre Dame Cathedral. This map shows Hugo's Chronicle of Stone. The cathedral sits on the central island, dividing Paris into 3 sectors. The population is cooped up between the city, the university, and the ville. Narrow streets and massive walls compress thousands into rigid boundaries. This layout dictates the social order. From the belfries of the church to the marble tables of the Palace of Justice, every street and every stone serves to categorize the Parisians by their district and their rank. Beneath that rigid social order lies a brutal moral vacuum. The people of 1482 operate on fear, harsh snap judgments, and rampant superstition. The same crowd that gathers to watch a holiday mystery play or a fireworks display in the town square will turn around and cheer for the public execution of a supposed rogue. That hypocrisy is the engine of Hugo's narrative. He challenges us to look past the Gothic stonework and ask what happens when the most righteous figures are corrupted and the grotesque prove to be pure. The highest rung of this moral ladder belongs to Archdeacon Claude Frollo. To the public eye, he is a man of intense intellect, a pious leader who has devoted his life to the church. This text reveals the reality behind that holy facade. Frollo's mind is consumed by the occult, characterized as a soul lost in the mazes of the Kabbalah. This intellectual obsession creates a deep internal corruption, leading the public to suspect Frollo serves as a conjurer. Frollo takes this obsession and weaponizes his standing. He uses the power of the church and the absolute authority of the law to hunt an innocent target. His character embodies a dangerous hypocrisy. Frollo is a terrifying predator operating in plain sight, protected by a holy mandate. Down in the mud and the chaos of the streets, we find his target, La Esmeralda, a dazzling bohemian dancer who travels with her pet goat, Jolly. The citizens and the authorities project their own deep-seated fears onto her. They brand her a dangerous outcast, a child stealer, and worst of all, in the 15th century, a witch. But this passage shows exactly who she is. Hugo defines her as an inoffensive creature and a human bee, a warm-hearted girl who leads a wandering life, vulnerable to the city. Her mere existence triggers Frollo's destructive obsession. Esmeralda exposes the fatal danger of societal projection. She is brutally punished because a fearful public needs a scapegoat for their own moral failings. To find the story's actual hero, we have to climb away from the streets and the law, high into the isolated belfries of the cathedral. This is Quasimodo. He is deaf from the bells, blind in one eye, and physically deformed. The city treats him with open disgust, dragging him out only to mock him by crowning him the Pope of Fools. Shunned by humanity, he forms a symbiotic relationship with the cathedral. He lives among the stone beasts, acting as the soul of the massive building. The narrative turning point arrives when the official systems of justice completely fail La Esmeralda, sentencing her to hang. At this moment, the physical outcast steps in. Quasimodo descends from the pillars, snatches her from the executioner, and holds her above the crowd, roaring the word sanctuary to the masses. In a single act of absolute defiance, he shatters the illusion. The man society discarded as a monster proves to be the only source of humanity and heroic beauty in all of Paris. Frollo, Esmeralda, and Quasimodo collide, trapping each other in Hugo's dark romantic web. This diagram maps the core tension, the divide between societal perception and objective reality. The tragedy lies in the inversion. Society perceives the priest as holy and the bell ringer as a monster. The narrative reveals the exact opposite, and this inability to identify monstrosity dooms them all. This highlights a heartbreak deeper than Quasimodo's physical state, a society that has lost the ability to recognize corruption when it wears a holy robe. Through all of this, the cathedral remains the silent, eternal witness to the human drama unfolding in its shadow. When human empathy dried up and the legal system failed an innocent girl, it was the stone edifice of the church that provided actual sanctuary. This is why the novel survives. It forces every new generation to confront their own shallow judgments and look past the facades of authority. Hugo leaves us with a final perspective. Beauty and ugliness reside within the architecture of the human soul, far beneath the surface of the skin.